good people, to From Behind the Drum Kit. It's an interview series where we interview musicians about their life and their process. Today, I'm super excited to have our guest today. Brock Butler, he is from Perpetual Groove. Such classic albums for me personally, like Sweet Oblivious Antidote and all this everything. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Brock Butler.
Hello, hello.
So Perpetual Groove, P Groove, I had to ask this first. Does this bother you? Because here in Savannah, pretty ubiquitous here, you know, like this is the coming up ground. Does it bother you when people shorten, or would you rather them do that?
Actually, I've always enjoyed that, and when we chose that for the band name, we didn't even have that in mind. But
Yeah.
if you have a workable nickname, kind of like P-Funk, you know, or like something that just kind of, you know, like once people started to shorten that, and now sometimes like they'll establish it in an article and then they move to the shorthand later if it's in text.
Right.
So
yeah.
I've always thought that was a pretty neat.
I think it's neat too
unintended
because
thing
it's
to it.
less syllabic, easier to say, and it gives the fans a little bit of like ownership, not ownership, but like it makes them feel closer because they're like, oh, this is P Groove.
It certainly indicates, you know, when it comes up, or if someone asks what I do, or it's like, oh, you're in a band, what's the name of your band? And I'll say, so, well, it's called Perpetual Groove. And then if they immediately move into P Groove, yeah, it kind of...
Oh, that's a really good like litmus
it shows
on.
that like maybe they've been familiar, or you know, more than just like, oh, neat band name, but
Right,
actually
or
that
I've
they
seen
might,
you on a poster
Sure,
or something like
sure.
that. Oh yeah, I've never even thought of that sort of term where it's like it's not as if you're vetting people as they talk to you. Like, is he gonna say P Groove?
right? But no, but only
but
just
when it-
notable when they do.
That's great though. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably pretty fulfilling. So early on, you said you went to SCAD, right?
I did.
Here in Savannah. Mm-hmm. For anyone listening who's not from Savannah, we are in Savannah right now. We're on Tybee Island, and so you told me earlier you met Adam at 10th and Butler.
Well, actually, we met at O House. So
Okay.
our freshman year at SCAD,
Okay.
we were in a dorm, same dorm, O House, Oglethorpe Avenue, and as luck would have it, you know, for not having a lot of space in the dorm room,
Sure.
I had my first couple trips into my room. I'm sure my roommates' parents were thrilled because it was like guitar amp, guitars. I think maybe on the third or fourth trip, some actual art supplies actually
Right.
started to...
I have a paintbrush.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
I do SCAD stuff too. It's not all just, you know. And I met Adam.
Yeah.
My second day, just kind of overhearing a conversation, started talking about music. He had his bass and his amp with him, and then Joe Stickney, who was the first drummer,
Sure.
and he lived in a room beneath me and had a drum kit.
No shit.
He, like, you know,
Yeah.
he would take them and put them like a Russian doll, like, you know, to make
Yeah,
room for it. So
yeah.
I'd kick drum and then put this. Put
I've
this,
seen
put
it.
this.
Yeah.
But that was the core of the group. We were all right there in the dorm together.
How lucky is that?
Oh man! So I never had to do like looking for
You weren't putting shit on Craigslist.
tear off.
Yeah.
Yeah. That I've not really had that experience because it's just kind of.
And how lucky that the musicians were good, though.
Oh,
Because,
sure.
Because I've been in close proximity, and they're like, "Oh, I play," and then we play together a couple of times. I'm like, "All right, that was cool.
Yeah.
Maybe next time," sort of thing. So to find Adam right away,
Oh, exactly. And Joe Stickney too, like the influences.
Yeah.
I think at the time, coming out of high school, and this was the fall of '97, so I was listening to a lot of Deftones and 311.
Fuck yeah.
You know, and I still love that music.
Sure.
But as I got to college and started puffing a lot more and
Sure.
partaking in other stuff, and Joe.
well, and the melting pot of different people coming from because
Sure.
SCAD, especially people from all over the country go there because it is pretty prestigious.
Mm-hmm.
So not only are you chiefing a little bit and expanding the mind, but hearing music tastes from
Absolutely.
other people have started to inform your preference.
You know, it's like I had heard of Fish, but I hadn't heard Galactic.
Right.
John Schofield. Joe is from
yes.
Fairhope, Alabama, so I think he picked up on a lot more of that New Orleans
Right.
jazz fest culture, and then also DJ Shadow. These are things that have remained
Right.
as mainstays in my
Right.
playlists and my records and
Yeah.
stuff since I met him. And Adam, his CD tower walking, and he had I saw Clutch and some other bands, and like certain ones that it's kind of like, well, obviously you don't rely strictly on MTV to tell you, or the top selling rack at Best Buy or whatever. Right, you know, if you've at that point, if you knew of Clutch, that meant you were, in my opinion, likely to be digging a little deeper than
because you have to search, because unlike now, any new artist or anything that's a little on the fringes is a little more available and in front of you, because like you can discover it really quick. Back in those days, you had to literally walk into a store, and the first things you're going to see are whatever the labels are pushing or whatever. So you don't get the chance to be like, oh, what's this album way in the back?
Sure. The access to it's great, but it's also kind of a double-edged thing of like, Adam and I talk about this now, that we were kind of lucky that in the late 90s, we were kind of the last era. There was, nobody owned a cell phone when I was in college.
Right.
Like, or if someone did have one, it was like, oh, look, that
holy
one
shit,
guy
it was probably in a bag in their car.
Yeah. And that the same of, without the social media component of if you're trying to get your band and people to notice it, now it's like a devastating deluge of there's a bazillion bands to check out.
It is.
So when you could do it with a tangible, we would burn CDs, stick a label on top of it, and say, here's a sample of the music, and here's the next couple of shows.
And most times people are going to be more conducive to listening to a recommendation by their friend versus,
for sure.
Because if they went and heard you, back in the day with no social media and stuff like that, they're like, I was at so-and-so, and I heard this band, P Groove, and these guys fucking kill it. That next friend that's listening to them is going to be like, okay, I trust you. I trust your... But now you're being fed sort of like... Well, not fed, but if you open up any YouTube or anything like that, if you don't know exactly what you're searching for, there's going to be so much stuff presented to you. It's almost like not seeing the forest for the trees. It's just, there's so much. There's a deluge of just stuff.
And I feel that... like I've got both Apple Music and Spotify, because if I'm collaborating with different people, whoever, that way, and I, for whatever reason, the Spotify setup, how it operates, I get turned on to some new stuff, because of how, like, I'll make a playlist and then it
starts giving you a few suggestions afterwards.
But with Apple Music, for some reason, it doesn't seem to...
Apple's got contracts with much larger companies, so they're like, oh, here's a YouTube album that we are going to put
this
on your phone without you asking.
Exactly. And that's... So if you listen to, like, the different band radio stations, like Kronbin, like, we've picked up a number of things.
Yeah. I picked up a whole genre I didn't realize existed. It's Swedish stony metal. Witchcraft, Graveyard, all these things, just by one of my Spotify playlists ended.
Yeah, I think it was like, and it continues on.
And it continues on. I was like, who the fuck is this? And Witchcraft became one of my favorite bands immediately, because it's like this throwback 70s stony Black Sabbath thing, So it's beautiful to discover things in those ways.
All Them Witches.
Exactly.
A really cool one recent.
He just saw me at the 40.
Oh, did you? Up in Athens? Yeah. Oh, I bet that was a barn burner. No, it's great, dude. Awesome.
Speaking of Athens, so literally so I'd seen you guys, Cagney's, around town or whatever, but in the very nascent early stages.
Oh, yeah.
I moved to Athens in 2004 not to go to school. I tried to go to school. I just wanted to go up there.
And we followed you. I think it was very close.
And so I was living with Eric Dunn.
Yep.
And Mike Fahey, he's a saxophone player, and someone else, I forget now. But you guys played at the theater. So that was the first time I'd seen you guys since, like, I don't know, like the Cagney's days. And I was like, so got to the theater, I was like, man, these dudes made it. Like, playing the theater, especially the old theater.
Oh, yeah.
Because the week that I got into Athens, it was Les Claypool that Wednesday and, like, Galactic that Friday. I was like, this is like a mecca for Southern, like, jam scene stuff.
It's sacred ground.
For sure. And then when you guys played it, I didn't even know you guys personally then, but I was like, the pride I felt and, like, how happy I was. I was like, this is what they deserve this. They made it. I immediately went home after that show and wrote a song. I was like, these guys are amazing. I got to write a 7/8 here real quick. It was just, so that was like my first real, indoctrination into, who you guys are and like what the sound was. It was also sort of my indoctrination into more of the jam scene, just in terms of I had like listened to a Little Fish, and I was never like a Panic fan. I think I was more not a fan of the people that went to see them,
The scene
around
sure.
them, than so that sort of sullied my opinion of them or whatever. But then you guys were my entree into it, and then Humphreys becomes my favorite band.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that was the natural progression. And then along the lines of me feeling pride and happiness for you guys for about a minute and 12 seconds in Charleston when you guys were opening for Humphreys. I've never seen a torrential downpour that went from literal sunshine to...
I was so disappointed. And at this point, because at that point, it had been a couple years, and I stay in touch with Joel from Humphreys, like as far as like happy birthday texts and stuff like that. But some of the guys that you catch up with them when you do things together. So I was like, I can't wait to say hello and congratulate them on their success, of course, and get to say, just to catch up. And we're up there, and we went from having a couple technical things, but we were like, it's okay, it's cool, we're gonna get there.
It began with some
it was just
hiccups.
running maybe about 10 minutes late because of something
Okay, gotcha,
we wanted to get it just right, and then we finally get into it, and I think we opened with Only Always, and then that typhoon came through, and the weather was just so bad, it was like you couldn't even see, so it was more of get the sensitive.
It was Forrest Gump Vietnam rain.
Yeah, and
it was sideways.
We bounced, man. And
you had to.
I didn't even get the chance to.
You had to, because right when
hi.
it started happening, I saw 60 staff with tarps, because even though the stage was like basically covered, it was sideways rain, and everything was hitting that fucking stage, dude. And I was like, how unfortunate,
Yeah, that was really disappointing. And then we were supposed to play with Humphreys at the Roxy, the Coca-Cola Roxy in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Right at the start of COVID. I believe that was supposed to happen in late March, but it was maybe it was, doesn't really matter.
Sure, yeah.
March 15th, down in Florida, was like, well, this could be weeks. I hope that still happens. And that was March of 2020. And so then again, it was like, man, I'm just never going to get to...
It's like, am I the anti-poon about playing with Humphreys? Am I the curse, man? Curse. So, coming up, and you were talking about the things that you guys were listening to when you saw Adam CD Tower and all that. Yeah. And so it's interesting because I've found personally that the music that I attend, like the bands that I go see, are an entirely different genre and feeling than what I listen to on my own time. Also, the music that I play, everything I listen to, I mean, obviously there's some influence,
Sure.
I hear myself playing drums like Igor from Sepultura sometimes. Just certain little things, But, so it kind of creeps in there. But there is a weird separation of the things that I listen to on my own time, and then what I enjoy going to see. And going to see you guys is enjoyable because the one particular thing that resonates with me is you can spend time during an improv like jam session and thinking that you're done with the ideas that could be done in this space and time, and then all of a sudden you have that one extra idea. It's just like Bobby Lee Rogers does the same thing. I think there's a similarity there.
Oh, I love Bobby Lee, man.
But I think you guys are really similar in that way because, like, if you were just on paper to say there was a 8-minute improv section of this song, they'd be like, oh, fuck, are they noodling, whatever. But with you guys, it's like, oh, there is more ideas that can be explored.
That's always been important to me, that, when the term noodling, which kind of implies a lack of direction or intent, like just
or
killing
jerking
time.
yourself off.
Simply because they did this song, and it was 20 minutes. Simply because it was 20 minutes doesn't necessarily
Doesn't
mean
mean
that it went anywhere.
Yeah, or yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I kind of like the, the launch pad of having a
Yes.
section that's meant for
Yes.
that, and then it's like we're it's not remixing now. It's remixed and remastered. Sweet Oblivious Antidote. We're gonna
Okay.
bring it out on vinyl.
Fuck yeah, dude.
So we've been, that's 20, however many
Right, yeah.
years, and I going back and listening to it now,
Uh-huh.
and
I imagine playing it for that long, your ideas are a little different.
Well, and that Teakwood Betts
Yeah.
on the album, let's just say it was 8 or 9 minutes,
Uh-huh.
and now it doesn't clock in under. If we're really like we need to move through this
Sure.
clock management, it's still going to be 15 or 16 minutes,
Right.
and this is because we've hit points where a new idea out of
Sure.
improvising,
Sure.
and then we kind of revisit that motif or that kind
Right.
of idea, and then eventually over 20 years,
Yeah.
have they become parts of the song?
Sure, and that was I'm glad you said that because that sort of leads into one of my questions. So let's say performing a song that hasn't already been recorded on an album yet, from the start of like when it was written, and obviously you're putting in parts on purpose so that there is a space there where you can explore and discover, and maybe something new will happen. The time from not road testing it, but the times you've played it so many times until you record it, how much of that gets informed and put into, because the thing is, it's going to evolve forever, just like you were talking about, Sweet Oblivious, now that you've re-listened and you've played it in so many different ways, you have a new vision of the song. So does that happen whenever, do you play songs that haven't been recorded yet?
Oh, sure.
Up into, yeah.
Yeah, and in contrast to Sweet Oblivious, that stuff obviously was road tested, life tested, because that was our first
Right,
going into the
yeah.
studio. Now our more recent self-titled album,
Yeah.
that its runtime is shorter. Like they're probably more concise, crafted
yeah.
songs, but then we took those
Yeah.
out on the road, and some of those are actually real. I think actually all of it. Nobody had heard those songs. They weren't road tested at
Right.
all. So then that was a different challenge of you do these things in the studio, some of these tricks and bells and whistles and stuff, and then you hope that you
can recreate
didn't dress it up too much
Right,
with
yeah.
studio stuff to where it doesn't
9
translate
layers
well
of
live.
guitars, and you're like, oh well, we don't have 9 guitar players.
Exactly.
Yes, it's an interesting point because playing, especially even after you've, and the way I think about in the jam sense, recordings, the recordings for me don't necessarily have to flesh the full idea of what the song will evolve into. It's the template.
Yep.
And then once you start playing it live, all of a sudden and the reason it's fun to go see you guys and Humphreys and shit like that is because, yeah, they're going to play these songs, but they're never going to play the same version of this song.
Oh,
It's
for sure.
ever evolving, and that makes it interesting. And people don't understand that matters to a person who connects with music like that and wants that from you.
Well, I know that there's a Pearl Jam song called "Comeback" off their Mango album, and the studio. It's a beautiful song,
Yeah.
great thing. And when I saw them in D.C. years and years ago, McCready did this guitar solo that's extended, and so every time after I heard this live version, I always want the studio out. I'm like,
you're waiting on it.
Hit me again, do it again. So, and it's, and I've seen, there's other live versions of them
Sure.
that I've looked on YouTube, and he doesn't do it.
Really?
It's like this one particular show
And they're
for
not the
whatever.
type of band that's like, I mean, if they have a solo, it seems pretty orchestrated.
Yeah, or it usually has kind of like, when he does the solo on a live, it always kind of does that.
Right, but it's signature in some sort of way, yeah.
But just,
Yeah.
just
Or if someone's playing the wall, you have to start the solo with, like it's not.
And I saw that Roger Waters tour,
Yeah.
speaking of the wall, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
But it didn't have the same feel as watching a band kind of get carried away one direction, or like feeling.
It was a little directed.
Yeah, it was more like almost like a Broadway play. Like very, and it was awesome. I loved it. But it was kind of like you knew, like they weren't going to go off of the.
You know what? But there is a space for that. You know what I mean? So I went and saw. It was just at like Okeechobee or something like that. I went and saw Hall & Oates, and I'm not like.
They were the first concert I ever saw.
No shit,
Hall
really?
Oates, yeah.
I go to that show. These motherfuckers hit every note. It hit every bit of my loins. It was what I didn't care if they ripped off some lead. You know what I mean?
I actually closed with a Hall & Oates cover last night down at
really?
Bamboo Room. Yeah, When the Morning Comes, because I love that live at Daryl's house.
Live at Daryl's house is amazing.
And when he brings in these guests, and they kind of.
He brought in Joe Walsh.
Oh, yeah, man. In the Amos Lee episode.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
And they did this song, When the Morning Comes, which it was not one that I was familiar with.
Really? Okay.
And then
but it was a Hall & Oates song.
Oh, yeah. But the way they kind of changed it all up, Amos Lee's input to it, and it just really just a fun song, and I've been doing that one for years. But yeah, in 1988 at King's Dominion, kind of a Six Flags thing outside of Richmond, Virginia, my dad took me there. And,
really?
And Hall & Oates was the first rock concert I ever
funny story,
saw.
the first rock concert I ever went to, 1994. Savannah Civic Center. It was a band called Widespread Panic.
Oh, yeah.
And all of my friends went, and I wasn't super into them, but my friends were, so it was more of like an outing for our friends or whatever. I knew one song off the radio, Can't Get High. I walked into the outside, and I was like, hippies, this is 94. I was like, hippies exist? Because there's people out there with like teddy bear backpacks.
Oh, sure.
They're selling bowls. You know, I was like, oh, this is, and I'm, let's see, I was 13. I was 13 then. And I was like, this exists. And I go in and I was like, this music's good. When are they playing Can't Get High? They never did. Which, in hindsight, I'm like, I don't care or whatever. But I didn't get it that they played the night before.
You would assume that it's kind of like, when Paul McCartney makes his made his set list for this tour, there are certain things that, it's almost like a 99% certainty that Hey Jude is going to be in somewhere near either the last song
near the end,
or the encore thing, and that the very last song. And of course, why wouldn't you close every show with this if you wrote "And in the end, the love you take." And that so there's the obvious spots for it. So I could understand what you mean. Like if you're not familiar with changing the set list every night jam band model.
But there's also a space for that too, because I went and saw Queens of the Stone Age one time, and my asshole bandmate at the time, he sent me the set list from when they played the night before. But guess what? Their set list
changed it up.
No, their set list is the same all the time. So I knew what was coming up. Now, I'm not looking for Queens of the Stone Age to jam out or anything like that. But there is a space for, play your set. These are the songs you want to play for this tour. You might be rehearsing musicians that haven't learned those songs yet, and you gotta play that set for whatever reason. So there's a space for that. But
I agree, and that actually it was at Paul McCartney at Piedmont Park, and somebody, it was a spoiler thing because there's people standing just across the way there, and I'm getting ready to see this Paul McCartney concert, and I can't help but overhear this dude say, it's kind of like, yeah, I looked at the set list last night. He opens with "Drive My Car" and da-da-da-da. So like just the first three. And I'm kind of like, oh, man. And he walks out, beep, 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 baby, you can drive my car. And I was like, well, I guess Can't Buy Me Love is going to be next, or whatever he said.
No, that's when you turn to the next guy and go, I bet it Can't Buy Me Love.
$20.
I talked to Paul earlier.
Yeah.
He told me exactly. He told me exactly what he was going to play. When you where did you record the first album? Was it Tree Sound?
Yes. Or no. Wonder Dog Studios.
Okay.
So technically there was another, like the first lineup, which was like Joe Stickney and the Tybee House folks. We did it at the Mozart SCAD studio.
Okay.
And we were here on a summer thing, so when people weren't using it, it was basically which is what I studied at SCAD, was film and sound.
I was going to say,
design.
when you were at SCAD, did they have that music department?
No.
Okay.
No,
See, I didn't think so. because I recorded there on a weekend because I had a friend that went there.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I ever walked in a door, and they've got the Icon 64 Pro. You know, I'm kind of like
I'm
a gear
sure
guy.
they've really updated it.
I'm looking around at fucking all these preamps that I've seen and microphone, you know, a playground. So yeah.
I think I caught a really lousy window as far as the technology of doing film and video and home recording stuff. It's like, you know, you didn't have laptops and Pro Tools and everything.
Or interfaces even.
Exactly.
You had
like
4-track recorders.
Yeah, you're talking about.
And then you bounce the forward.
Jazz discs and just, so, and as far as like small, like the size of the cameras here and stuff, like you'd have to go check out all this other stuff. And now that the stuff that's, it's more affordable, it's more accessible. And, but I never really wanted to be like a film director per se or something like that.
But you wanted the functionality of using the...
I felt like that the skill sets would be part and parcel of like how it's a good thing to understand how things are recorded, why they're recorded, whether it's music for film or television or just capturing the audio and stuff. So it's
important because you can trust yourself.
Yeah, if you
to
know,
make it happen, at least in a passable way.
Sure, and like just to have even some vocabulary and understanding.
Where you can speak to the person who is producing, you know, be like, hey, I think the 440 is a little high.
Right.
You know, just very
knowing
simple shit
some
like
frequencies on the graph.
Exactly,
and it certainly helps everything. Even this evening, I'll use it when I'm when I use my loop pedals for my solo show. I take a lot of the knowledge of track, like when I set a loop and where I place things in the loop is really like I'm just
because you're
mixing on the fly.
What frequencies take up what part of the frequency range.
So I think it helps.
So you're not going to stack up, you know, a bunch of 1K.
Exactly. And which things will cut. Like the first pass, it might sound like, oh, that shaker was a little hot.
Sure.
But I know that the next round,
once
the guitar's on top of it, it's going to put everything in a certain lane. Or I hope.
Sure, yeah. I mean,
don't always get it right.
That's the try. Well, speaking of that, this goes out after you play tonight, whatever, at Chamaco's. But I remember back in the day, one of the most joyous summers of my life. It's called Bubba Gumbo's now, but back then it was Loggerheads.
Oh yeah, man.
And I
didn't realize it was a Bubba Gumbo's.
Yeah, now it's Bubba Gumbo's.
That was such a great spot, man.
During that time, and this was pretty fucking deep in the heyday of P Groove being like at the height of like, you know, people knowing, and to have you there every fucking Sunday for a whole summer, no one else was anywhere on this island except Loggerheads.
Oh, so much fun.
And that was the first, I was familiar with like Keller Williams or whatever, but it wasn't my cup of tea necessarily. But seeing you loop, I was like, oh, that's a way to approach it if you don't have a band or whatever and playing a solo show. And it was mind-blowing to me because, and I remember one very particular thing. You did a little rhythm track on the, like hitting the... There was one snare part that like, or you know, like the snare sound, it was like just a click off. You realized it, you said, fuck it, I'm gonna roll with it. And you turned them, not necessarily a mistake. It was literally just.
It was probably a mistake.
But whatever, but you recovering, you know, me as a like musician listening to that and seeing you recover from, you know, and live it and fucking own it. And do it. I was like, man, that was just so impressive to me. That you know, and I'm just fanboying here.
No,
this is meant to be an interview. I'm sorry.
Those are really special times. Like it's my buddy Jim Foley owned it when it was Loggerheads.
Was he the bald guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now he's on to Seamus Wines. So it's plug for Jim Foley.
Oh, there you go, Seamus Wines. Yeah.
But yeah, man, he had that spot out there, and it was just
it was great. The deck was beautiful.
And at that point, they were still like, I think I was out of SCAD. But,
this
there's
was like,
still a lot of friends and peers still around, like
7 or 8 or something like that.
Oh yeah,
maybe. Yeah.
Might have you? Yeah, that sounds close enough.
Whatever.
But like there was still so many folks around, and so it's like they play there until. What, like 2 or 3 in the morning? Then go out for the late night.
Before we end this first segment, I want to end it with this little anecdote, and we'll be right back with this. But so I was telling Kelly earlier, New Year's shows are very important to me. I don't waste them on anyone. You know what I mean? Like if I'm going to see something on New Year's,
It's a big choice.
It's a big choice,
Setting
you know,
the tone
because
for a whole new year.
you got a lot of choices for bands out here on New Year's. So Jessie Gulliver, shout out because she's the one that hooked us up for this.
Oh, wonderful.
She and I went to Terminal West to see you guys. So you and I both have a proclivity for wearing Atlanta Braves hats. That particular night, I had a Atlanta Braves hat on, and my ginger beard was about the exact same length as yours. Did we just cut out? Right when I was getting into the story. It seems like it's still recording, so I'm going to finish the story, and then we'll see if it...
Sure.
So set break comes along, and I'm walking around, and people are coming up to me, kind of looking at me weird.
You're a good-looking fella, man.
And they go, "Hey, man, that was a great first set." I was like, "Oh, thank you, man.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. You guys are great." All right, we'll be right back, guys. And welcome back to From Behind the Drum Kit with my friend, Mr. Brock Butler. So, new album. Let's talk.
New album.
New album.
You mean the most recent?
The most recent album.
Well, let's see where to begin. We brought in a guy named Jason Kingsland, who's worked with Band of Horses, amongst
Okay.
others.
Oh, so a producer.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And kind of went into it, and as I mentioned earlier, the building music from the floor up, from the ground up in the studio where it hasn't been played live.
That was the thing I was going to ask. Has it ever been get there, see what happens in the room?
We gave ourselves actually a lot of time. Like we went to this beautiful spot up in North Carolina, and where the recording studios in one building, and they also have a house on site there, so everyone's kind of camping and, or not camping, but bunking up together. We're all having breakfast together. And
But you can have a space where it's a social space and then workspace.
Yeah. And so we were able to try, the long and short of it was like a number of different methods. One point just kind of spontaneously broke into everyone's kind of like a drum circle, but a little more wonky than that. Like just like one
more
person.
wonky than a drum circle.
Sure, yeah. I mean, just kind of like there were no bad ideas, like you shaker or like hit a mic stand, even like just to get these really weird.
I've put rice inside of a pill bottle.
Exactly, like and if that sums up, that was the spirit of it.
Sure,
like try to get the weirdest kind. And this again goes to now we have access to all these kind of neat keyboards and wonky vintage gear that has a really, really cool sound.
Right.
But then you have the problem of if that tone color became the centerpiece of something, how do you
recreate that live?
Yeah. Or do you even try? And there's plenty of versions.
But if it is the signature lick or thematic thing of the song, and it does, and you can't recreate it live,
or how much do you even want to consider that? Like go to like the Beatles doing Sgt. Pepper's or Brian Wilson with Pet Sounds kind of stuff. Like now with modern technology and multi-instrument people, they're able to.
Sure.
I saw the Brian Wilson and Al Jardine play Pet Sounds and was amazed at how they were able to capture a lot of these.
Really?
Yeah, really big kind of sounds. And but when Sgt. Pepper's, the Beatles at that point, I think they weren't remotely considered with or concerned with.
Well, they didn't play live anymore.
Exactly.
Because
So
they
it's like,
couldn't.
well, how are we going to do this big orchestral part or whatever?
Because it's only going to be on a record. We don't have to necessarily.
So if those are the
But now if Paul wants to recreate any of that stuff, he can hire 600 musicians
and
to do it.
And he does, man. They crush it.
And the luxury, when you speak of being in a studio, or, I don't know if it's, because studio time, if you're uninitiated, it costs money. So typically your first couple records or the first couple of times you record, if you're not, if you're going to a bigger studio and letting other people take care of the engineering and production and stuff. You're paying for that time. So typically, if you're a poor young band, you're like, all right, we're rehearsed, we're ready to go, we're going to get in there, we're going to get these takes, some magic might happen in the spot or whatever. But then there's also the luxury, if you can, to go to a studio where it's a day rate, you got time, you're not like, oh shit, we got 1 hour to get this thing done, to be able to all sit together and have the ideas.
Oh, absolutely. And also not even just that, like we had done some pre-production at a, cheaper space,
Right.
just kind of working through some stuff, like actually all in the room together.
Sure.
And then go to the studio and get all, and really so much of that too is like if you need a synth line or a guitar line, you're not necessarily anchored. Like what you really want is the drums, because like in the physical space, that's the takes that you need to get in the space you get done.
Yep.
And where
a keyboard goes straight into the board. You
Sure,
could play
yeah,
it. You could play it on a mountaintop, and it would still sound the
there's
same.
plenty of stuff that you can do working remotely,
Remotely,
so to
yeah,
speak.
yeah.
But all the things that we really wanted to get, and access to these kind of weird vintage instruments. and stuff,
Sure,
was like,
yeah.
that was part of the draw of,
Yeah.
of the studio. And but then not a lot, but considering we went in and did Sweet Oblivious, all of us, it was set up like we were just doing a show. So it was like everyone
played live.
We do the take,
Yeah.
there's the take. And what few overdubs there were might have been like one more pass with the guitar kind of thing.
Maybe just a double. Or,
Sure,
yeah.
and not too microscopic or
Yeah.
intricate.
Yeah, because if you start digging into like, oh, I could do one more little thing
Mm-hmm.
here, one more little thing here.
And we had that experience too, where like
Sure.
it is simply because options exist and technology exists doesn't necessarily mean that you should.
Well, I was discussing
use
this
it.
with him earlier before. There's this weird thing about the constraints of not having certain technology. You know that, all right, Beck's first album, 4-track recorder, he knew he had to work within that space. So it wasn't like, let me try 14 different keyboard sounds or this and that. It's what you had was what you had, and you worked within that and was as creative as possible. All of a sudden, you have everything at your fingertips. You sort of lose the creative drive that is the core of the song. Now you're like, here's a bell, here's a whistle, let's toss it all on. This thing.
You can get caught up in
Yeah.
stuff that doesn't ultimately serve
The song. It it's there. The option is there to do it.
And what was nice though, compared the difference, like so, Sweet Oblivious, we played that material a bunch. We go in, and we didn't really mess with the arrangements. It was all just here are the things.
Right,
We do the
yeah,
things. The self-titled album, the most recent one, there was enough time that passed between when we did the tracking, and I would have said there's a song. The first track is called Part 3, and there was a version of that had some different lyrics, and I was getting attached to what I felt was like, we got it. It's solid stuff. And then had some life stuff happened where I had my sister pass away, and a lot of things happened in just a couple of months.
Sure.
And so I go back to Atlanta and talk to Kingsland, and I'm just like, hey man, I had this idea about changing this one line. And that was all I was thinking. I was like, I just want to rework this thing. And then he liked that. He was so intrigued by
like the newer direction.
He goes, you might have just issued yourself he goes, I'm going to issue you a big challenge now. He's like, hey, what do you think about
Scratch it.
yeah. And there were still some bits that were working, but then but I was like, well, sure, why not? And that's something I hadn't had that experience. Yeah.
Well, see, the thing is, unfortunately, through tragedies and stuff like that, I think he most likely realized that you coming from that place after experiencing those things, that visceral thing, he heard it.
Oh, yeah.
It came across, and he was like, hey, this was good, but right now, this new stuff you're bringing.
And actually, that's how he said. He says, quite a lot has happened in the last 3 months.
Yeah.
Would you agree? Does that sound like Kingsland? And
I'm kind of getting chills because I know that vibe of like You know, I lost both my parents when I was super young. So when things like that happen, my output of, you know, if I'd have written something the day before,
Sure.
it would have been one way. You write it 2 days after something like that happens, even not intending to be profound or
Right, and you know the if I haven't even, I'm sure there's the version of the earlier vocals and stuff, and I've not listened to that in however many years now.
Right.
But I feel like if I were to listen to him now, there was a tone that I was trying to achieve, and then when this loss happened, it couldn't be denied.
Right.
So like the
it
difference
existed.
was like, he's trying to.
You weren't reaching
Yeah,
for anything. You
exactly.
weren't attempting to do something. It happened, and that's where typically most great art happens. Because if we can think back on like who are the most transformative artists or songs or whatever, 90% of it comes from some sort of tragedy. You know what I mean? Think about Lane Staley.
Oh, for sure, man.
Like
absolutely.
That it wouldn't mean it. Down in a hole, listening to that performance on the Unplugged the last time and he's in there, you know, nodding, but at the same time, it sends something inside of me because of the pain that comes across. Lyrics, whatever, like all those things matter, but there's a certain zeitgeist between the listener and the artist that you can't duplicate if you intend to.
For sure, and it's not an exact quote, but it was something to the effect of, like, I know that heroin's bad, but it's done wonders for my record collection.
Some of the greatest,
you know what I mean?
yeah, exactly.
It's like on the what, like, and that's it. Kind of like sums up this thing of where when people are going through what you know, not just that in Lane Staley's case, but whatever
but
people
it's universal,
are going,
whatever they're actually like. One of the most transformative times in American music, besides jazz as well, but early American blues. This is the approximation of heartache. It's the approximation of feeling, you know, marginalized.
Sure.
Or
all the struggles of the
and it's given
culture in places where that would have
it's
originated.
given to you in that sort of. I know what he's talking about, even though it's dressed up a little bit like with a shuffle. I got my boo shoes, whatever, but you understand that it comes from that really real place. And then on the other hand, jazz, the most American music there is, literally the only music America really invented and, you know, perfected. Jazz came out of these young black men, first off being put out and being like, hey, entertain us, boys. And then they're like, all these standards and big band shit, like, whatever. We're so much better at our instruments that we're about to invent counterpoint. We're about to invent the crossover of bop and improvisation and exploration, and people are going to get it. And if they don't, I don't care.
The attitude of the person that plays it. The Miles Davis quote. He's like, 10% of it, how good someone is how the notes they hit. And he goes, the other percent is the attitude of the motherfucker who plays it.
And that's real as fuck because from anything I've heard, if you ever met Miles, he was a jerk off to you. You know what I mean? But I'd rather him be that good at the trumpet and be an asshole than be a nice guy and not create the music that he did. You know?
Yeah. And there's another great example of something that, you know, of the things that he was going through and how it manifested into what he was playing and.
Because think about
how he was expressing himself.
Sure. Think about how those artists were treated, especially being black. You know what I mean? They were pushed.
Oh, for sure.
Pushed into the sideshow thing.
One of my favorite electives of a class I took at SCAD was called Sociology of the Blues, or the History of Blues. And the professor walked in and he was kind of like, you know, if you think you're going to learn about Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones in here, let me just disavow of that notion right now. You're going to learn about Big Bill Brunsey, Charlie Patton, and
Lightning Hawk.
Exactly, Blind Lemon Jefferson, and talks about how it was field holler music, and they built instruments with the tools that they had around, like the Jack White building that diddly bow at the
with
start of
the,
it might get loud, and he's
yeah,
like,
with
"Who
the
needs a
Coke
guitar?"
bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really, that really sums up of
Yeah.
that's how these, the slide guitar, because those
Sure.
were the like barbed wire, glass or metal
Yeah.
slides, and these are the materials that were a very interesting class.
That's funny that they had. I'm glad that he approached it that way. And the other thing he could have said was, and if you do mention Led Zeppelin, I want you to understand that the entirety of Led
These are the
Zeppelin
people
1.
they stole it from.
Yeah, exactly. The entirety of Led Zeppelin 1 is old black blues artists.
Pretty much, and he actually, I think he did that as a tag.
Yeah.
He was like, we eventually will get into
Yeah,
some of
right,
this and
yeah,
this, and he goes, but a lot of it's gonna be showing you that how this was kind of snatched from
Yeah.
here, and people didn't get necessarily their acknowledgement and their due.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Until Pat Boone does your song or something,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? but then down the line, you have people who reinvented a bit, like a Stevie Ray Vaughan type thing. He's not stealing the vibe from these people.
Sure.
He created this different driving vibe. And it wasn't always necessarily about heartache and shit like that. He took the part of blues that was the emotive, touch the ears and the heart at the same time. It's not necessarily about what he's saying, but when he bends those, when he does Little
sure.
Wing,
I wish I had been able to
yeah, I
see
never got
him
yeah,
in person.
Never got a chance to see him either. Yeah,
I actually saw a quote from J.J. Cale earlier this morning, and he's talking about how or trying to describe what he thinks of his music, why it became what it did, and was that he said he failed. He was trying to emulate the blues and this other kind of stuff, but for whatever reason, I guess being the guy from Texas and Oklahoma guys, they couldn't get, so basically what he was trying to do, he failed at. And the end result is all of this stuff that everybody loves from his. It's a real humble way to say it, kind of I was trying to do this thing. It didn't quite work out, but this is what it is.
I think that's probably happened to a few people
Oh,
because
I'm sure.
I've definitely heard artists be like, well, I was going after sound A, and then all of a sudden I made this and I thought it was trash. But at the same time, every musician, I think, looks at their stuff very critically, and it's rare that you're like, I just wrote this song, this shit kicks ass. I mean, not saying it doesn't happen, you know what I mean? You feel good about it sometimes, you know what I mean? But your process, without the intention of writing a song I need to put something on paper or whatever, how organic is the getting to something that's becoming a song for you?
I think very organic, or as often as not, it certainly is. There's an analytical approach that comes in a bit later, refining the lyrics and stuff.
Right.
But usually it feels kind of like, we'll take 3 weeks, for example.
Sure.
It's like I was walking around with this theme music in my head, and it never resolved because it kept starting over again, so I guess I needed to write it so it would stop. I needed to figure out how to end.
You had to resolve it.
How to end the song. And the lyrics kind of a lot of times if Adam is playing some stuff at his place, the lyrics are kind of just phonetic placeholders, kind of like chip away at just kind of hum something along, and if something hooks in a certain emotional direction,
or a line, or
exactly. And
brother,
and
I got 100 videos of my camera turned around, holding the guitar, just going, just phonetically.
Yep.
And because you have you'll just be playing guitar or whatever.
And that might even reveal to you what the lyrics will be in a more specific emotional context. It's kind of like Sigur Rós. You ever listen to that?
Yeah, they're Icelandic,
right?
Yeah.
So it's like Italian opera or something. It's I have no idea what the guy is saying, but I feel it. I feel what he's like trying to
Saving Private Ryan. They're listening. I don't know what this
Exactly.
Italian. Oh no, it was
Band of Brothers.
no, Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
I had no.
To this day, I
had
still don't
no-
know
I
what
don't
that lady.
know what that Italian lady was
I
singing.
don't know what she was singing, but we were all free men on that day. I think it's safe to say I liked Andy Dufresne from the start.
No one knew what was behind that
I'll
post.
take that tall drink of water with a silver spoon up his ass.
Turn left on 14th Street. You just murdered a hobo.
He would, in fact, do the podcast that day, and then go and play at Chamaco's.
Later on that night, he was at Chamaco's,
Yep.
and it was 100 degrees, just like the weatherman predicted, which is not something that typically happens. Well, dude, this has been super amazing, and I appreciate you coming by and doing this. And most of the reason is because you as an artist, I just like to understand, and you've been ubiquitous in my life just in terms of being in your orbit because all of my friends know you, and I just never, had the chance to.
Well, I'm grateful
to-
for the. Now
to
we
get
know
to
each other. better.
Yeah,
man.
this is beautiful. And if you ever want to sit down again when you're in town,
Oh, for sure.
we can dig deep.
And now that we got the connect, maybe instead of doing so often, we'll be kind of down in the downtown area.
Sure.
That maybe and when it's not Memorial Day weekend.
Sure, of course,
as well,
yeah.
Maybe we'll actually
Yeah.
make a big weekend of it, and maybe I'll see about like a Huckapoo's or 2-night stand at Chamaco's kind of thing.
Yeah, I can-
and have even more time to
Oh
hang
yeah,
and
for sure.
chat
We
it
can
up.
hang more than just outside of the. Because I can definitely.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be formal.
yeah, it
we
doesn't
can
have to
hang
be
out
formal.
anywhere.
But I'm just glad that I just knew it would go really well because this just makes me happy. That's what
Well, I
wanted to say.
appreciate you having me, man.
Yeah,
And
no worries, man. This
it
has been
really is a
amazing.
nice, fun thing to do as well.
Especially because
know.
have you had a chance to long form
Not
chat about music?
I mean, I've done some
Outside of, like, 5
some,
minutes?
some radio interviews, maybe
Yeah.
but certainly not like a full
have a chance to
hours
actually
worth of chatting and
to
kinda
get a
let
thought
yeah.
out.
and it's nice because I've certainly I've talked like I was on a long form situation
Sure, yeah.
in short
Yeah,
form.
yeah.
So I just so a question gets asked and it's like, I don't know, how did he get
Yeah.
talking? How did we get to Luke Skywalker?
The
from
Earth is
that?
what?
Yeah.
Empty?
What?
Hollow Earth? What the-
Exactly. Yeah. Who knows?
Well, likewise. Thanks again. Appreciate you guys listening, and we will see y'all in a few weeks.
Have a
Cheers,
beautiful
brother.
day, everybody.